Good morning and welcome to a continuation of our series on climate change activities around the world. Last September, the chairman of the Air Resources Board, myself, and our chief deputy for motor vehicles were in Japan meeting with auto companies. And on our last day of the trip, Dr. Sawyer insisted we needed to go by the Ministry of the Environment and Ministry of Transport and meet our colleagues in the Japanese government who he knew were working diligently on climate change. And we had just 1 hour with them to talk before we had to rush to catch our plane. But it was obvious in the first 10 minutes they had an enormous amount to share with us. And so he said, stop everything. You have to come to California. Please come and share all this information with us. And so after a few months of working out the details, here they are, and we're delighted to have them here to share with all of you what Japan is doing to tackle climate change. There are going to be 4 presentations this morning, first describing the Japanese government's overall plan, the mandatory greenhouse gas emissions reporting system, Japan's Voluntary Emissions Trading Scheme, and the energy and technology policy perspectives aimed at raising energy efficiency of vehicles and electronic appliances. They'll also cover Japan's views on international action to tackle climate change. Before we get started with the speakers, let me introduce Go Kobayashi, who was instrumental in coordinating the efforts to bring this delegation here today. Thank you. Go Kobayashi is the Chief Administrator of the Office of International Strategy on Climate Change, Global Environment Bureau, Ministry of the Environment. Currently, he's involved in various climate change negotiations, including the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the G20 Glen Eagles Dialogue. He also worked on studies of carbon tax, environmental education, environmental reporting by businesses, public pollution, and chemicals control. Our first speaker this morning is Hideki Minamikawa, who I learned last night before he worked in this field was an ardent conservationist and is an enormous fan of our national parks and hopes to see many more of them than he's seen already. He is currently the Director General of Global Environment Bureau at the Ministry of the Environment since September 2006. The Bureau is responsible for tackling various global environmental issues, including climate change and the depletion of the ozone layer. He's been with the Environment Agency since 1974. His previous posts included water and air quality, environmental health, including public pollution and chemicals control, waste management and recycling, and nature conservation. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Minamikawa. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy. It's my pleasure to be here with so many people, distinguished participants who have been working to tackle climate change. I'm grateful to CAB people for giving us the opportunity to address you today, this morning. So I'm very happy, and as you can see, my cover picture shows a 5-story pagoda. The oldest one was constructed about 1,050 years ago. But of course, they can stand even now, and it can stand forever. This kind of pagoda are made of wood and soil, most of them. So they cannot emit any GHG gas. So it's very good for environment. Okay, next please. Today, I'd like to present you an overview of the 3 major pillars of Japanese environmental policy. By understanding these, you will be better able to understand why Japan has been working so intently to tackle climate change. So next, please. The first of these three pillars is establishment of a low-carbon society. The second is establishment of a sound materials cycle society. The third is living in harmony with nature, so-called biodiversity. Undertaking these three pillars will be indispensable for Japan to create a sustainable society and for it to contribute to global community. Next one, please. First, let us look at the establishing of a low-carbon community. It has been proved, just a moment, proven scientifically and understood by people as they go about their daily lives that recent climate change is attributable to anthropogenic GHG emissions. Recent extreme weather events have been quite apparent even to non-scientists. People have been taken aback by the extreme heat of recent summers and the quantity of rain falling during sudden storms. We have also witnessed changes in harvest and the incidence of pest outbreaks. These phenomena become even more clear when observed at a global level, with numerous worrisome happenings taking place, including the unusual heat wave seen in Europe and increases in the size of typhoon and hurricane. The lifestyle found in each region of the globe have been shaped by the climate of the region. Most of Japan has a neotropical monsoon climate, and the Japanese lifestyle and culture have developed in reflection of this type of climate. Maintaining the climate thus contribute to the maintenance of Japanese culture and history. Next, please. Okay. Climate change implies not only rising temperatures, changes in the amount of precipitation and erosion of coastlines, but also adverse impact in the range of areas from human health and agriculture to ecosystems. Next, please. According to the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, a number of adverse impacts from climate change emerged in the 20th century, last century. Next, please. Also, it's clear that the impact shall become aggravated further in the near future, and that early countermeasures are needed. It will explaining Japanese climate change countermeasures in greater detail later. Next, please. You can see the 3 R's. The 3 R's, by which I mean reduce, reuse, and recycle. Keywords for Japanese policy regarding waste management and recycling. Japan very much hopes to disseminate the concept of the 3 R's throughout the world community so that natural resources are conserved all around the world. Next, please. Prerequisites for disseminating the 3 R's include, first of all, establishing proper waste treatment facilities. Second, the existence of fully fleshed out regulations regarding illegal dumping. And finally, the sound treatment of harmful waste generated in the past, as you know, such as PCB and DDT and some POP substances. Japanese waste treatment standard, the most stringent in the world, and its waste treatment technology is at the world's most advanced level, I believe. Next, please. Japan continues to advance the establishment of a system for promoting waste treatment measures. Under this scheme, not only the central government, but also local governments, private sectors, civil society groups such as NGOs play critical roles. Next, please. It shows treatment of PCBs. Treatment of the highly contaminated PCB has launched and so far proceeded well. Next, please. The third major pillar of Japanese environment policy is conservation of natural resources. Since ancient times, Japanese people have had strong feelings of affinity towards nature, and have lived harmoniously with nature. This point becomes apparent through the large variety of words dealing with climate-related differences, each having subtle differences, such as well as through high poetry, in which such words are used lavishly. The Japan of 1980s, 1960s, and the early 70s destroyed its natural resources at a stunning rate in order to foster economic growth, an excessive situation which Japan now regrets. A variety of schemes, including those for the conservation of natural parks and other designated areas, and for the conservation of wildlife ecosystem, have been established and spread. About the fact, my home business was nature conservation. I visited most of Japanese natural places, and also visited some national parks around the world. So, for example, I visited some national parks also in USA, and I was very impressed with countermeasures and nature conservation. For example, Everglades in Florida, it conserves very water area very well, and also I visited Zion National Park. It's very close to Las Vegas, and also there I could enjoy climbing on the top of rocks, and I could enjoy walking in the small river, in the creek. It's very interesting. So, but I think cooperation between many countries to conserve nature is very important for us. Next, please. This slide overviews Japan's characteristics as a landform. The fact that Japan has 4 clearly defined seasons is much appreciated by Japanese foreign residents. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. It's very clear in Japan. Next, please. Japan is well known throughout the world for its rich ecosystems. More than 7,000 kinds of vascular plants, 1,000 kinds of vertebrate animals, and 70,000 kinds of insects can be found in Japan, despite a land mass of only 380 square kilometers. In addition, many of these species that are unique to Japan. Until recently, however, we failed to recognize the value of those precious ecosystems. Next, please. Biodiversity is threatened by three crises. The first of these is the loss of or extinction of species and the destruction of ecosystems. The second is the impact of decreased human activities on nature. Third is the impact of alien species. Next, please. In order to combat those three crises, we are promoting measures which underline nature conservation, nature restoration, and substantial use. Next, please. We have formulated a 5-year plan for ensuring biodiversity, aiming at enhancing measures such as international cooperation. Next, please. Promoting these key policy areas, namely climate change countermeasures, waste treatment and recycling measures, and living in harmony with nature, is crucial for ensuring the soundness of Japanese society and for maintaining the value that are unique to Japan. That is to say, environmental policy does much more than conserve the environment. It also helps the Japanese be uniquely Japanese. I believe that the same thing can be said in every country and every region. Next, please. And now, I'd like to touch upon the specific actions for tackling climate change. Next, please. In 2008, we finally entered the first commitment period under the Kyoto Protocol for combating climate change. United Nations Framework Convention Climate Change was adopted UNCED, a so-called Earth Summit, which was convened in Brazil, Rio, in June '92. Specific reduction targets were set forth in COP3 held in Kyoto, Japan, '97. The picture on this slide is one that was taken at COP3. In 2001, the United States announced it was not ratifying this protocol, a situation which we found very unfortunate. Japan decided to join the protocol the following year. It was then Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi's stance that Japan should place even greater emphasis on the importance of tackling environmental issues and contribute to the global community by taking proactive stance with regard to climate change mitigation measures in particular. Next, please. This slide gives an overview of the Kyoto Protocol. Even now, you hear some people within Japanese business community saying that the protocol is not fair, is unfair. Notwithstanding the United States' absence as being unfair, now that Japan has ratified the protocol, most Japanese are making serious effort to achieve Kyoto target. Next, please. This slide gives you a rationale behind the decision of former Prime Minister Koizumi to ratify the protocol. The Kyoto Protocol is a first step towards solving climate change, and if the Kyoto Protocol fails to enter into force, future participation by China and India will also, of course, fall through. Various impacts of climate change have been established by the IPCC. Since Japan lacks natural resources, taking the lead in shifting to low carbon society, low carbon economy, will contribute positively to future energy policy measures. Japan's contribution to the world through its military are significantly restricted by the Japanese pacifism constitution. Yet, the environment is an area in which Japan can make a significant contribution to the world. Next, please. Japan's roadmap for achieving its commitment under the protocol consists of 4 elements, namely the Kyoto Protocol Target Achievement Plan, 4 things, utilization of the Kyoto mechanisms, and the national movement for saving energy. Next, please. The aim of the Kyoto Target Achievement Plan, a plan decided upon by the Cabinet on April 2005. It's designed to ensure achievement of our 6% reduction commitment by utilizing the accumulated wisdom of its citizens while aiming to contribute to the international community through our effort for environmental conservation. Next, please. However, if we look at our current situations, while we should be reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, in fact, our emissions have increased by 8% compared with the base year, 1990. Even making use of sinks and the Kyoto mechanisms, we have to achieve emission reduction through domestic measures of over 8%. Enhanced operating rate for nuclear power plants is expected to reduce emissions by 2 to 3% of that 8%, meaning that the absolute reduction of 6% will be necessary. Next, please. This slide shows the current state of CO2 emissions broken down by sector, as well as future reduction target. Future red letters shows the future reduction target by each sector. While the industrial sector has successfully reduced CO2 emission, a reduction of another 30 million tons will be needed in this sector. We have finally seen a turnaround in the trend for transport sector. We now see the trend toward reduction, with 7 million tons of reduction expected. Emissions from office buildings and households are the ones causing the most concern. It will be crucial to achieve drastic reductions in these sectors. Next, please. Among the key factors involved in achieving the Kyoto Protocol are the development of technology and dissemination of products, superior efficiency of Japanese photovoltaic systems, and their rates of dissemination are among the very highest in the world. Low-emission vehicles manufactured in Japan, particularly hybrid vehicles, are well known around the globe. Next, please. A wide range of measures have been promoted to deal with energy-related CO2 emissions. With regard to industry, the pledge and review system, voluntary system advocated by the Nationwide Business Association Keidanren, constitute an important scheme. The government carefully reviews various measures, encouraging businesses to enhance those measures in cases in which the content is insufficient. We expect this system to be quite successful. In commercial and household and transport sectors, we have great expectations from what we call the top-run approach, in which the level of energy efficiency achieved by the most efficient product in specified product category today becomes the minimum efficiency standard for that product category a few years in the future. In addition, we have been promoting a switch to renewable energy from fossil fuels. Promotion of both fuel conversion and nuclear energy will also be among our most important options in the future. Next, please. This slide overviews the most important measures to be taken. The industrial sector will extending the degree of coverage of energy-saving obligations from current 70% to 80%. In the transportation sector, we are committed to the expanded use of eco-fuels. In the residential and commercial sectors, we will be strengthening energy-saving performance standard and promoting the purchase of energy-efficient electric home appliances. Next, please. The Japan's Top Runner program, which I introduced just minutes ago, will contribute significantly to the efficient use of energy. Currently, the Top Runner approach have been applied to 21 products and have demonstrated remarkable results in the area of automobiles in particular. Next, please. And Japan launched the mandatory greenhouse gas accounting and reporting system in April 2006 to encourage businesses and buildings to come to know the amount of their CO2 emissions, and they then make a voluntary effort in emission reductions. Japan's fiscal year starts in April and in March. Data will be reported to the government late in the spring, after the close of the first year. The government will then disclose the information it receives, meaning that the public at large will be able to access that data. As they learn about how they compare to similar business, private sector entities will accelerate their effort toward emission reductions. Next, please. The industrial sector have adopted the pledge and review system, a voluntary action plan that is unique to Japan. This system have been advocated by the Keidanren, through which top-level managers from major companies come together. The Keidanren has established CO2 reduction target for various industries. As one example, the steel industry have its own target to reduce their energy consumption by minus 10% compared to its 90 level. Next, please. With regard to the emission trading system, ETS, whose legal framework has yet to be introduced in Japan, and the voluntary scheme for this was launched in 2005 as a part of the preparatory process for establishing an ETS in Japan. So far, approximately 100 companies have joined this scheme, and actual emission trading is taking place. Private companies looking to participate in the scheme were invited to apply for subsidies from Ministry of Environment to assist with their CO2 emission reduction efforts. The Ministry then screened potential participants on the basis of whether sufficient result could be expected from the cost indicated. While we, of course, encourage them to reduce emissions, the company are also allowed to purchase emission allowances from other participants. Participants can trade allowances freely throughout 2006. If participants don't meet their emission reduction target, either through their own reduction effort or through the purchase of allowances from other participants, they are required to return the government the subsidy they received. Next, please. Mixing bioethanol with gasoline for use as automobile fuel is crucial in reducing CO2 emissions in the transport sector. Japan aims to introduce 3% ethanol or E3 extensively in the transportation sector. An experiment for the introduction of E3 is underway in Miyakojima Island. It's an island in the most southern part of Japan. In order to avoid competition over resources in light of the food problem, this ethanol is manufactured from waste sugarcane after the sugar has been extracted. In the very near future, all vehicles on Miyakojima Island will be running on E3. A number of actions have been launched on a trial basis to promote its dissemination all around the world. To meet the reduction targets set for transport sectors, the promotion of low-emission vehicles, such as hybrid cars, which have been promoted under the top-line approach, a shift towards smaller vehicles, and the introduction of ethanol fuel will be necessary. Next, please. Of course, we also moving in direction of measures dealing with low-carbon transportation system as soft measures. To be specific, the promotion of a modal shift and of ESD, environmental sustainable transportation, are important approaches to achieve the efficient transport of goods. Next, please. In encouraging businesses to accelerate emissions reduction measures, it is of the utmost importance that as many people as possible understand the importance of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, including those of CO2. Japan has been promoting an awareness-raising campaign called T-6%, and encouraging citizens and businesses to join. So far, 1 million citizens and 10,000 businesses have joined this campaign. Next, please. He's former Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi. Our Prime Minister himself is taking the lead in promoting this campaign. He is the first participant in T-6% club. Next, please. So through this national campaign, we are trying to advocate effective and targeted awareness raising to change our lifestyles. For that purpose, we propose the concept of cool business, a summer business style with no jacket and no ties last summer. According to the recent survey, 95% of Japanese people are aware of a Cool Biz campaign, and 60% of companies participate into it. I believe this data indicates our campaign last year was successful. Electric power companies estimated that electricity demand last summer was reduced by some 210 million kilowatt hours, equivalent to the consumption of 720,000 households, which was a significant effect, I believe. Next, please. Under the name of Cool Biz in summer, Warm Biz in winter, the campaign aims to reduce the amount of energy used in heating and cooling. Next, please. This is the latest advertisement of warm beans, featuring new Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He's saying, "I'll start taking actions by warm bees. How about you?" he says. 6 different kinds of actions are shown in this picture. Lowering room temperature to 60 degrees centigrade in winter, avoiding excessive packaging by carrying reusable bags, purchasing eco-friendly products, driving in a fuel-efficient manner, putting the plug of electric appliances when you are not using them. Next, please. This winter, we have been promoting the Warm Bees campaign in offices and households by encouraging people to make small changes in their daily lives. Next, please. It is imperative that we reduce CO2 on a global scale. To do this, the Kyoto Protocol is merely a first step. By what amount should we reduce CO2? What we need to do is reach a primary balance of 3 gigaton carbon from 6 gigaton carbon, in which anthropogenic emissions and natural gas absorption are balanced. But in the meantime, CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere have been increasing. The concentration have already reached 380 ppm and will soon witness 450 ppm. It's without saying that we could soon witness a point of no return. Next, please. The Kyoto Protocol is a significant step, but yet a first step. Just decrease 5% emissions only from developed countries. In addressing CO2 emissions from developed countries that have ratified the Kyoto Protocol represent only 30% of all global emissions. Next, please. This chart indicates that Japan is the fourth largest emitter after US, China, and Russia. It's projected that total emissions from China, India, Brazil, and other developing countries will exceed those of developed countries. Next, please. We sincerely hope United States rejoins the fold and returns to the Kyoto Protocol. Also, participation by China and India will be indispensable for the reductions beyond 2012. We need to establish an enabling scheme for all countries to take effective mitigation measures in accordance with their capabilities. Next, please. Japan's point of view on the post-2012 review is as follows. First of all, CO2 emissions from Annex 1 countries represent only 30% of all global emissions, whereas those from non-Annex 1 countries, that is, developing countries, exceed half of all global emissions. With the objective of establishing a primary balance of zero emission of CO2 beyond nature's capacity to absorb it, we will hold discussions on our goals and formulate a scheme for how to achieve these goals. Reduction effect by every country will be essential. In addition, the utilization of market mechanisms such as CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism, will play an increasingly important role. Next, please. Japan will further strengthen its efforts through domestic measures in a number of sectors, as well as through international cooperation, including by use of the Kyoto mechanism. Japan will contribute to reinforcing global measures against climate change. We have been promoting the transfer of energy sufficient and environmentally sound technology to developing countries. In addition, we have been jointly promoting monitoring and observation along with Asia-Pacific countries. Also, Japan will promote a public awareness campaign on the climate change issues. Next, please. Japan and the UK have been conducting joint research such as since the Green Eagle Summit held in 2005 in England, and are proactively promoting research on the 2050 Low Carbon Society project. Next, please. This is a workshop on developing visions for a low carbon society through sustainable development was held in June in Tokyo with the participation of experts from about 20 countries. The outcome of the 2050 project will have a favorable effect on the global community. Next, please. The Asian Pacific Network for Global Change has been proactively contributing to international activities. APN was established in 1996 as an intergovernmental network, and today APN plays a significant role in supporting global change research in the Asia-Pacific region. Next, please. The goals laid in APN's strategic plan involve conducting research from a global point of view to provide a broad range of knowledge to policymakers. Next, please. And also, we have organized a lot of seminars on climate change. Next, please. Last one. Climate change is given great importance with regard to ODA as well. Measures to combat climate change play an important role in capacity development and technology transfer. Today, I have given you an overview of Japanese environment policies, focusing on measures to tackle climate change. We in Japan are well aware of and very impressed with the various climate measures implemented by the government of California under the auspices of Governor Schwarzenegger. Japan has long admired California's spirit of innovation, which with regard to environment policy making, and we also view California as a role model in many respects. I hope effort by California will be the breakthrough that encourages the United States to rejoin the Kyoto Protocol. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minamikawa. I think we'll hold questions to the end, but those who are watching by webcast can send your questions in by email, and we'll collect them. And those of you in the audience can be thinking about questions you would like to ask as well. Our next speaker is Takeshi Sakaya. He is the Deputy Director at the Climate Change Policy Division, Ministry of the Environment. He's been working on the development and implementation of greenhouse gas abatement technologies, including those for renewable energy and energy conservation. Earlier in his career at the Ministry of the Environment, he was involved in the international climate change negotiations and the multilateral environmental cooperation programs. Mr. Sakaya is going to talk about mandatory emissions reporting in Japan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to be here in California and to have an opportunity to make a presentation about our climate change policy. Following my Director General, Mr. Minamikawa's presentation, I will talk about a little bit in detail about Japan's mandatory greenhouse gas accounting and reporting system. The system just been launched last April. And although Japan has not introduced mandatory emissions trading scheme, I believe this accounting and reporting system definitely will accelerate my country's businesses voluntary action plan. And thank you. In this sense, I think my country now has a very effective policy to combat climate change. So let us go into the detail of the system. Okay. Japanese mandatory greenhouse gas accounting reporting system was established in 2005 by the amendment to the law concerning the promotion of global warming countermeasures, so-called climate change policy law. The system officially started last April, and the first reporting will be due in June 2007. The system has two objectives. The first one is this system to establish the basis for the emitters' voluntary efforts in calculating their emissions by themselves. And the system promotes the emitters' efforts through plan, do, check, and action, so-called PDCA cycle. The second objective is to promote voluntary actions by citizens and businesses through publication of information. Emitters will come to know the state of their own emissions and of their countermeasures, and come to realize the necessity of further actions. The reported data under this system will flow as shown in this slide. The emitters are to report their emission data to the minister who is supervising their sector. In principle, the emission is to be reported by each place of business, not by each enterprise or entity. Emitters can report other additional information relevant to their emissions, such as what kind of countermeasures are taken. The minister who has jurisdiction over the business will tally the information, then notify the Minister of the Environment and the Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry of the tallied information. Then both ministers further tally the notified information jointly for individual business entity and by prefecture and by business type. Then the minister of the two ministries will make the compiled information publicly available. On the other hand, the emission data of each place of business will be disclosed only on request basis. The business establishments which emit considerable amount of GHG are required to report under this system. All 6 kinds of greenhouse gases regulated under the Kyoto Protocol are subject to the reporting requirement. The businesses that consume large amount of energy are already required to report their energy usage under another law, the law concerning the rationalization of energy usage. So in regard to the energy-related carbon dioxide, such businesses are now also required to report their amount of carbon dioxide emissions derived from energy consumption. These businesses include For industry sector, first category is that energy management plans designated under the law concerning rationalization of energy usage, which has the annual energy consumption of more than 1,500 kiloliters of oil equivalent. For transport sector, freight carriers, consignors, passenger carriers, and air transport services whose businesses are larger in scale than the threshold values. For other type of greenhouse gases, such as non-energy related CO2, NCO, methane, and F-gases, emitters that meet both of the following criteria. These two. The first requirement is that the business establishment which is emitting more than 3,000 tons of CO2 equivalent of each GHG. And the second requirement is that business entity which is more than 20 full-time employees as a whole. If emitters meet these requirements, then they shall report the amount of their emissions only for the gases which exceeds 3,000 tons at a single business location. Now I'll tell you about the details of the accounting rules. Firstly, the accounting period. As a rule, for carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, the accounting shall be done for every fiscal year. The Japanese fiscal year starts on April the 1st and ends on March 31st. Emitters must report their emission data for the previous fiscal year by the end of June every year. For HFC, PFC, and FF6, accounting shall be done for every calendar year. The reporting due date for these three types of GHGs is also the end of June every year. The calculation should be done in accordance with the means stipulated in the Cabinet Order and the Ministry Ordinance. The means is provided by type of activities that are subject to the reporting requirement for each type of GHG. Emitters are to aggregate the amount of emissions for relevant activities by type of GHG. Emitters are allowed to use different calculation methodologies and or emission factors from those set forth in the Cabinet Order or Ministry Ordinance. This slide shows examples of calculations. The first one is the calculation of carbon dioxide emission generated in the waste treatment. The first one is the, if the waste is incinerated or used in the product manufacturing, for example, some kind of waste plastics could be used in the iron making process. In such cases, the CO2 emission is to be calculated by using this this formula. The amount of emission is given by multiplying the volume of waste by the emission factor. The second example shows the calculation the amount of HFC emitted through the use as solvent or cleaning agent. The emission is given by subtracting the volume collected or treated properly from the volume of used HFC. Then I would like to touch upon the details about the reporting requirement. Emissions are to be reported by each place of business. But for transport sector, the reporting shall be done by each business entity. Reporting due date is the end of June every year, but specified consignors report for 2006 emission, this is the first year of accounting, That report shall be submitted by the end of September 2007. That is the exceptional rule. The report of an emitter shall be submitted to the minister with jurisdiction over the business in question, and some ministries allow to submit the report to their regional representative bodies. Information to be reported includes the information on the emitter, that is the location of businesses, and information on the emission of each greenhouse gas. Each place of business reporting energy-related carbon dioxide must calculate its emission by totaling following three types of emissions. The first one is the emission resulting from fuel use, but except for emission associated with the supply of electricity and heat to other parties. The second category is the emission resulting from the use of electricity provided by third parties. And thirdly, emission should include those resulting from the use of heat supplied by third parties. In addition to this, business places supplying electricity or heat as major area of business, such as power plant, is to calculate and report their emissions, the use of fuel, without taking into account the allocation or distribution of emissions to other sectors. When specified emitters of non-energy related carbon dioxide use some kind of waste as feedstock or fuel, they have to report separately the emission associated with the use of waste and other non-energy related CO2 emissions. If businesses use calculation method and emission factors different from those stipulated in the cabinet order, they must delineate the methods and factors they use. In case of non-fulfillment of reporting obligations or falsified reporting, offenders shall be fined no more than 200,000 yen or some $1,600. As I explained earlier, large emitters are already required to report their energy usage under the law concerning rationalization of energy use, so-called energy saving law. In order to avoid putting an additional burden to businesses regarding reporting, the regular report under the energy saving law may be used as a substitute for the report of energy-related carbon dioxide under the GHG accounting and reporting system. In addition to the central information on greenhouse gas emission amount, specified emitters may submit additional information relevant to the GHG emission. If the emitter requests, such information will also be made publicly available. The disclosure of such information will certainly promote the development of emission reduction efforts and facilitate the understanding of the status of emission by each member of the society. The types of relevant information to be provided by the emitters are listed here. First one is the information on the changes of the reported emission. For instance, increases or decreases, causes, self-assessment of the changes. Secondly, the information on the changes of GHG emission unit or emission intensity. thirdly, information on the measure taken related to the reduction of GHG emissions also can be reported. For example, energy-saving activities, reduction of emissions attained when third-party use the product the emitter manufactured, or cross-cutting efforts conducted across places of business. And fourthly, the information on accounting method of GHG emissions also can be reported. Finally, I would like to talk about the compilation and the tallying of information reported and the public release. Minister of the Environment and the Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry will be notified of the results of the first tallying conducted by the minister having jurisdiction over the business. Then the ministry, the both minister further compile the notified information, adding up the emission by business entity, by prefecture, and by business type. Then the ministers of two ministries will make publicly available the compiled information and relevant information. Also, both the ministers are notified of the information on each of the business locations and the emissions for each type of GHG. They will record electronically such information together with the relevant information for each business location. The recorded information of each business location will be disclosed only on request basis from the citizens. This is the end of my presentation, and I think California and Japan have a different GHG emission profile and different political, economical situations. But we share the goal of protecting the climate, and we have to make remarkable progress throughout that. So I really hope this information will be very helpful to your state to develop further climate change policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We specifically requested that talk because the Air Resources Board has to adopt regulations for mandatory reporting by the end of this year. And under state law, we have to decide what is a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions. And as you heard from Mr. Sukiya's talk, Japan has decided both on emission thresholds and on size of business and number of employees as a way of measuring that. Also whether to look at indirect and direct emissions, and they've decided to include both. So it's very instructive to us how they put that program together. And then we've chatted about the protocols that underlie their program and how they compare to our protocols. The next talk is going to be about Japan's Voluntary Emissions Trading Scheme, which is just now getting off the ground and is a smaller scale than we're looking at here in California, but I think will also be very illustrative to us. And that presentation is going to be given by Yasushi Ninomiya. He is the Deputy Director of Kyoto Mechanisms Climate Change Policy Division of the Global Environmental Bureau in the Ministry of the Environment. Since joining the ministry in 2004, he has led the development of Japan's Voluntary Emissions Trading Scheme. He has also led international negotiations related to market mechanisms under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Previously, he was a policy researcher of Climate Policy Project at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. He has both a Master of Science in Energy Economics and a PhD in Economics. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ninomiya.
Thank you. Oh, you can hear. Thank you. My name is Yasushi Ninomiya, Deputy Director of Climate Change Policy Division, Ministry of Environment. In this presentation, I would like to outline Japan's Voluntary Emission Trading Scheme, which we call simply JVETS. JVETS is the first trial of cap and trade, real cap and trade schemes in Japan. Real here means JVETS has a number of necessary elements as required as practical emission trading schemes, such as monitoring and reporting verification system for calculation of CO2 emissions and electronic registry system for accurate accounting of emission allowances. Let me start with this slide, which shows time frame of JVETS as first round as an example. Each round of JVETS can be divided into 3 parts, from left-hand side to right-hand side, setting up period, and commitment period, and finally, adjustment period. In the setting up period, very left-hand side of the chart, which is a fiscal year, first fiscal year, the participants of JVETS have to commit a certain amount of CO2 reduction over the commitment period from the base year emissions. The base year emissions here, Base year emissions are calculated as an average, numerical average of the past 3 years of actual emissions. This can, oh my God, very difficult to use actually this one. This is in this case, 3 years, 2002, 2003, and 2004, an average of these 3 years emission of this. And in this case, the participant of JVET commit this blue part of blue part of emission reduction in this chart. Oh, I cannot show this year. Okay. So after reducing the commitment amount of emissions, initial allocations at emission allowance, which we call JPS, the name of emission allowance in this JVETS, JPS, is agreed as this amount. Oh. This is the agreed amount of JPS, emissions allowances, to allocate to each participant. At the same time, the participants are offered subsidies to install new facilities leading to CO2 emissions over its commitment period. So therefore, the participant of JVETS commit certain amount of CO2 reduction over its commitment period in exchange for subsidies given for them. So in the commitment period, which is the second fiscal year, employing the new facilities with the subsidy, the participants have to demonstrate to achieve the emission reduction, which they promised in exchange for the subsidy. At the beginning of the commitment period, JPS initially allocated to each participant, and during this period, the participant can trade JPS freely. And in the adjustment period, after the commitment period, which is the third fiscal year of JVETS, the CO2 emissions over the commitment period are calculated and verified by the qualified hour verifier. The list of verifiers listed second last of presentation in your handout. And if necessary, the participant can also trade JPS up to the end of adjustment period, which is end of August. By the end of August, each participant has to retire JPS in corresponding to amounts corresponding to the verified emissions over the commitment period in the JVETS registry system to comply with the emission reduction target. If participant cannot do so, the subsidies paid to them have to be returned, and the name of the company will be opened for the public. So these can be considered as a penalty of JVETS to the non-compliance participant. And one interesting feature of the JVETS is the CER credit coming from CDM project and the Kyoto protocol also can be used to comply with target as well. Okay, let's move on to this slide. This slide sums up what I just explained, so therefore I can skip off this and move on to the next slide. And this chart visualizes the comparison between base year emissions and initial allocation and actually emissions with adjustment of emission trading. The left-hand side two bars shows how to set the base year emissions and initial allocations. The base year emissions I explained. Oh dear. This is the base year emissions, and this amount, the participant commits to reduce CO2 emissions. So therefore, the initial allocation of JPS becomes this amount. However, the actual emissions, CO2 emissions of this participant are calculated as this black bar. So obviously, this amount above the initial allocation of JPS, the deficit of allowance. So in this case, the participant need to emission trading to get this amount of allowances through emission trading. Then the participant can comply with their target. So this is the meaning of the emission trading in this scheme. So number of participants of JVETS currently are 89 entities, or nearly 90 entities are joining this scheme. The share of industrial share by them are shown here, and somewhat the food and beverage industry dominates around 30% of their participants, and following building sector, which including the department store, the hotels, university, hospital, and office building. I mean, these like including 20% of the participants. And followed by textile, paper and pulp, chemical industry, and metal and ceramic. These are industries joining this JVETS. And this system covered only CO2. It excluded other 5 gases such as HFCs, SF6. These things are excluded from this system. However, this includes also non-energy related CO2 such as processing CO2. And as I explained, base year emissions are calculated as an average of actual emissions over the past 3 years. Currently, the base year emissions in total of participants, the 2.5 million tons CO2 per year. It's not very large, but certain amount. And emission reduction commitment actually promised by current participants are 0.5 million ton equivalent CO2 per year. And just simply calculation subsidy paid to them divided by the total emission reduction. It simply shows the cost of emission reduction in this scheme. It's calculated as around $10 US ton CO2 emission, which is somewhat cheaper than normally expected in Japan. And as I said, actual emission during the commitment period also verified. Okay, move on to next chart. And the boundary is different from EU emission trading. In this scheme, in this JVETS, the boundary is setting at the factory and building basis. The EU ETS is the boundary setting at the installation basis. That's different from the EU ETS. And we have our own registry system, and which I explain shortly. And also, web-based trading service is called the ghd.com is available for the participant. I will explain shortly as well. And And the important thing is the banking of allowance, so-called leftover allowance to bank to the next commitment period is possible in this scheme. So this is the example of JVETS registry system. So any transactions of allowances, actually JPS, namely initial allocation, transfer, and acquisition, and retirement, must be handled within this JVETS registry system to ensure the accurate accounting of the allowances. This is an example of an interface of GHD Trade.com. So before the actual transaction of allowance, namely JPS, JSERT, within the JVETS registry, as I explained, it is needed the making contract between the participant, knowing who wants to sell the credit or who wants to buy and how much and how many. So in order to facilitate this activity, we offered participants the JVETS, this GHD.com service. Using this service, the participants are expected to find out their trading partners and making a contract. So this is an actual example of this system. It shows, very difficult to say, probably to see, but it shows somebody wants to sell the JPS, 200 ton of equivalent JPS at a price of around US $20. Okay, this is the difficult part, I'll skip it. So verification process, I think, is a very important part of the emission trading. In the JVETS is conducted in this way to make sure calculation errors in total emissions figures are less than 5%. So we consider the minimization of calculation error less than 5% is somewhat critical, important to secure emission trading is very safe thing. And we also established a JVETS monitoring reporting guideline. The aim of this monitoring reporting guideline is to establish more systematic calculation and verification of the CO2 emissions without spending additional time and effort by both the participant and the verifiers. This is the content of JVETS monitoring reporting guideline, which will be published very soon to apply to the second round of JVETS participants. And to do this, we are also establishing the JVETS emission reporting systems. Using this system, participants simply put their energy consumption data into the database. The system automatically calculates their CO2 emissions based on their energy consumption data, after putting the CO2 emission data into the databases. And the verifier may be performed the verification through checking the databases via internet without on-site visiting, unless otherwise it is very necessary. And also, as a regulator, we, Ministry of Environment, can conduct compliance assessment through these databases. So therefore, with this system and the monitoring reporting guideline, it is expected the verification process becomes much more systematic and efficient. So this is an example of the interface of the system. In this case, sorry, it is written in Japanese, but participant put the energy consumption data into here, and CO2 emission from the participant automatically calculated by the system. So that's simply the list of the verifier for the JVETS. It's 90 organizations at this moment registered as verifier of the JVETS. Okay, in conclusion, the meaning of JVETS. The JVETS is the first experiment or trial of real cap and trade emission trading scheme in Japan. So it creates good opportunity to learn the actual practice managing emission trading, such as formation of efficient and accurate verification system, and establishment of monitoring reporting guideline, and the development and maintenance of emission reporting and registry system for accurate accounting. So this is not very big system and not as much as EU ETS, but I think it is a good step up towards the climate, meaningful climate change policy of Japan. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions about that one. But before we open up the floor to questions about all the presentations, we have one more. Our final speaker is Susumu Okamoto, who's going to talk about 2 sheets of paper. Energy and technology policy perspectives aimed at raising energy efficiency of vehicles and electronic appliances. Mr. Okamoto is the Deputy Director for the Global Environmental Affairs Office in the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry. Joining this office in 1996, he's engaged in policy planning, research, and analysis in a broad range of fields including trade, automobile industry, international economy, environment, and climate change. Currently, he's in charge of a series of negotiations, including the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Asia-Pacific Partnership, and the G8 process. He's also responsible for forums such as the Committee on Sustainable Development at United Nations and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Annex 1 Expert Group. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Okamoto.
Thank you very much for kind introduction, Ms. Witherspoon. First of all, I'd like to show my sincere appreciation for Chairperson Dr. Sawyer and Ms. Witherspoon to give us this great opportunity to be here to discuss about very important issue for all people living in or on Earth. I think it is very good. It's great opportunity and a privilege for me to be here to exchange our views with people in California, where environmental issue is very important, and also the measures taken by the California government are very progressive and very energetic. I think my presentation focused on energy and technology policies. Mr. Minamikawa has already explained a very broad range of Japanese government policies on climate change. And I think I would like to use very specific measures, policies as an example to explain on Japanese perspectives. Let me get started with the explaining the background, the total story behind Japanese government energy and technology policy, particularly related to global warming. I think Japanese energy efficiency policy has a long history. As you can see in this display, the very big event which brought us kind of sense of emergency to improve our energy security was oil crisis in the beginning of 1970. At the time, of course, Japan is a country with very little natural resources, and it is very important for Japan to keep the sustainability of getting natural resources from outside, particularly oil. So improving energy efficiency and consumed in Japan is a very important issue since at the time. This slide shows you what's the difference between two different times between 1973 and 2003, after 30 years after oil crisis. This oil stockpiling shows the preparedness for Japan on the energy security. Oil stockpiling increased by double in 30 years. And the underlying alternative to oil, nuclear, gas, coal, oil, is well balanced into 5 categories. Of course, oil is a major energy resource, so still in almost half of the energy resource, but there was closely 80% in 1973. And the most astonishing thing in terms of energy efficiency is the improvement of energy intensity, particularly in manufacturing. In 30 years, over 30% has been improved in manufacturing sector because of energy reason, as I said, after oil crisis. That is a very big motivator to a Japanese manufacturer to improve their operation in Japanese domestic land. So this is the situation in 30 years in Japan, and there is a basic principles or ideas behind that change in 30 years. The security of energy supply is the most important and pressing issue in 30 years ago, but at the same time, increasingly, harmony with environment, alternative to CO2, is also important. And other thing is efficiency of the market is one of the tools to utilize the promotion, to utilize the power of the market to promote energy efficiency. So these notions are behind, of the basic notions are behind of our Japanese government policies. And this slide shows the quick look about what is the current situation in Japan's energy consumption. On the graph, in the graph on the left, Japan shows very high level of energy efficiency compared to other developed countries. There are some reasons for that. One of these is Japan is mainly Japanese economy is mainly composed of manufacturers, and as I said, manufacturers are very eager to improve their energy efficiency. As a result, even to measure energy efficiency per GDP, Japan's level of energy efficiency is very high. On the right, you can see some sectors in manufacturing in Japan which are compared to other countries. Almost all are the top level, not necessarily number one, but the top level of energy efficiency has been achieved in many Japanese sectors, particularly in manufacturing. So this is the situation in Japan particularly in terms of energy consumption situation. But we believe these situations are not enough to address climate change we are facing right now. The graph on left side, this graph is made by American institution, Battelle. This is, I think, famous among the community of climate change negotiation. This graph shows how large is the gap we have in technological development. On the top, I think it's red line is the it shows technological development has been stopped in a 1992 level. So it's just assumption. If this technology has stopped at the time, this emission from all over the world increase rapidly. This is not the real life we are living right now. But if the middle line, which is orange, I think, shows technological development is going on in a very good pace. But even so, this line shows the trend of just increase of emission. Unfortunately, we have to reverse this trend to the downwards. So we need the more energetic improvement of energy, which can be brought by innovative technologies. And the line on the bottom shows the level of 550 ppm concentration CO2 in the atmosphere. Even so, I'm not here to advocate this level of concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is appropriate to reach the ultimate objective in under UNFCCC. But even 550 requires a large level of innovative technologies in the very future. So that is a problem we have to deal with from the perspective of technology. And on the graph on the right side, if we reach that level, 550 ppm, what kind of technology we need, we can get some sense of that. The energy saving, fuel switching, nuclear power, renewables, CO2 sequestration. This variety, these wide range of technologies can solve this gap to achieve the reduction we need. So there is only one method, one technology which can solve all problems in this global emission reduction. So in this situation, Japan and other countries engaging in the development of technologies. On the graph on the right side, you can see the level of investment. This data is shown by government. So Japan and the United States is far larger investor to climate change related technology, energy related technology, compared to other developed countries. Of course, there are other sources, particularly from private sector, to this kind of investment. but innovative technology requires long-term investment, and it has uncertainty for developers. So it is not so easy any private company to invest huge, large size of the money to such kind of new and innovative technology. So we believe these are the areas the government needs to support. So in this sense, Japan and the United States has a large share of total government investment in this area. But we believe these kind of investment by the public sector can be promoted, or we need some kind of scheme to promote this type of investment from private sector. And then I'd like to spend a little time to explain the specific measure to reduce CO2 emission, but in this sense, in that case, specifically speaking, to improve energy efficiency from specific products. That program is called Top Runner Program. Top Runner Program is was introduced in 1998, and this is about the energy efficiency standard regulation. And the character of this regulation is interesting in the sense that it utilizes the power of the market to improve energy efficiency of the specific products. So theoretically, it doesn't harm competitiveness in the market, or rather promote competitiveness in the market and win the achievement of energy efficiency in a specific product. And that slide gives you a sense of what type of regulation it is. There are some different type of cars with different energy efficiency, in this case, fuel efficiency. And we divided these cars into specific category, which is associated with the weight of the automobile. And in each automobile category, these manufacturers are under the obligation to improve fuel efficiency at the top level of the fuel efficiency. So that is the reason that program is called Top Runner, because any other manufacturer has to keep up to the level of the Top Runner manufacturer in the specific category in terms of fuel efficiency. So as a result, the targets are normally 4 to 8 years as a target, a span. So after the end of the target, the market can be transferred from the wide range of the energy efficiency level into a very narrow level at the top level of fuel efficiency. And there is no bias or bad effect in the fairness of the market. That's the reason, as I said, this program works with the market mechanisms. I'd like to talk a little bit more main features of this regulation. So what kind of products are under this regulation is maybe your question comes into your mind. These, the bottom of this slide, you can see the 21 products from passenger vehicles, air conditioners, refrigerators, TVs, DVDs, computers, oil water heaters, transformers. 21 products are the target of this regulation. These products are selected because they have a large volume in the market and they have a certain level of energy consumption. And some of you may notice these are the appliances, so-called, in the householding sector and the transportation sector. We are facing right now the increase from these two sectors, but we are trying to reduce or improve the intensity in specific products in two sectors. So in other words, we succeed to improve energy efficiency in two sectors, but we do not succeed yet to bring the absolute amount reduction, which equal to our target. And in the middle, you can see the letter wordings. Top runner programs create win-win situation and virtuous cycle. So what I mean by virtuous cycle is that is a situation created by this regulation. The manufacturer has the incentive, even though whether or not they like it or not, they have to stick to the process of improving their efficiency of their products, because that is a source of competitiveness which is regulated by the government. But at the same time, the consumers are aware of this benefit from good energy efficiency products. They say they can save the energy consumption, in other words, money. And as a result, these incentives give the manufacturers also another strong incentive to promote more, to go to the more high level of efficiency. And government can revise the level of energy efficiency to the higher level. As a result, in a very short time, we can succeed to improve the energy efficiency. So how to establish top runner standards? That would be a question. We have a specific advisory committee to that top runner standards. They talk about technical and methodological aspects of the standards, and the committee's membership are composed of industry representatives, academic experts, researchers, consumers, local government representatives. So many wide range of stakeholders get together to talk about these standards, what level would be appropriate, and what size of the products which should be covered this regulation. And This discussion has the influence on the final decision. What is the target standard and the duration of the standard setting, and it is not just a top runner level. I said top runner, but in reality, they decide the little bit higher level compared to the current level in the market. So they can give the incentive to the manufacturers to make innovation to improve their energy efficiency current level. So in other words, no manufacturers can be allowed to be sit on current situation because they are top runner. Even if they are top runner, they have to be under the incentive to improve their current level of the energy efficiency in the products. That's why this program can promote innovative technology, not just deliver the existing technology into the market. And of course, we get public comment from wide range of the different kind of people. And we report to the WTO TBT to avoid trade barriers to imported products. And the final phase, final protocol of this setting top runner standards is amendment of government ordinance. And these are, that is the setting the target is not the only one Japanese government doing under this program. Top runner program has to be promoted by other measures. I can give you some of these examples. The display obligations, retailer assistance, labeling system, those small measures can promote to diffuse the target product into the market. This is example you can see in the bottom of this slide is display obligation. And if you want to buy at the shop the specific appliances, and you can have the knowledge about what that product, specific product is, what type, what kind of level of their achievement in the top runner standards, and how much energy this specific product can spend in a year. And you can easily calculate, you can get the sense of how much you can spend for this specific products in a year. These information are helping consumers to make a good choice to buy this top runner product. And the retailer assistance labeling system is also help the distribution of that products. And so then we succeed, set the standards, and we succeed to promote the products into the market. So then we have to verify what's going on in the specific products. And we have the questionnaires which are delivered to the manufacturers and get the information. That is a rule under this program, and manufacturers have to submit this paper with the information the government required to make a judgment this standard improvement is appropriate or not. And if the manufacturers are not in compliance under this rule, government offers recommendation to the manufacturers to give them kind of advice to improve the energy efficiency in the products. And we have this scheme, but fortunately, so far there is no manufacturers in non-compliance. There are some actually, but in consultation we can reach to the solution to improve the situation. So there is no company yet to be ordered to do something that government requires. So finally, about this top runner program, you can see the consequences of the progress. We have 21 products, items, but good example, good student of these items are, you can see here, TV, VCR. These kind of products are very much improved, more than planned under the regulation. TV sets 25.7% compared to 16.4%, which was the original target set by the committee and the government. And the passenger vehicles in the bottom of the slide, you can see 22% improvement compared to 23%, which was set under the regulation. But the duration is different. The target is in 2010, but even 6 years before, almost the same number, same improvement has been already achieved in 2004. So these products are under the consideration of improvement of the energy efficiency level target. So the good thing of this program is we can watch what's going on, this actual efficiency level, and if that situation is already improved, we can do necessary additional method, in this case improve of this level of the set by the government. And other example for innovative technologies, the government has already, Japanese government has already spent a lot of money and investment to promote this photovoltaic technology. The graph on the right, the line of this graph shows the total size of photovoltaic power, and the first stage until around 2000, the public money and the investment are pulling the demand in the market. And as you can see, around 2001, 2002, the demand is leaving off the investment by the support by the government. So it means already Japanese market of this technology reached to almost half of the global market, and this market needs, demand is working well autonomically, and as a result, they do not need, they reduce the support from the public sector, and that is the government's role, particularly at initial stage R&D and commercialization in a specific technology. These are other examples, solar power and fuel cells. These fuel cells has a huge potential to improve this situation, and the Japanese government already spent about 60 billion Japanese yen for each year, and we have the target by 2010 to set 200 megawatt for stationary fuel cell and 50,000 fuel cell vehicles in the Japanese market. These are the numerical targets can be achieved through the Japanese government support, and after that, we expect the market power promote the distribution of the technology. And also, very important technology is CO2 sequestration and storage. And the last international negotiation at the United Nations in Nairobi, we had a long serious discussion about how to promote CCS, this technology, and we are doing that kind of discussion in the international arena. But at the same time, Japanese government are determined to invest to promote this innovative technology, particularly to reduce the cost of introduction of the CCS technology. Japanese government has almost $6 billion every year for R&D in a CCS technology. And these are the other examples, a model project for international energy efficiency improvement. I'm sorry, these was a little too small to read, but you can get the sense of the Japanese government doing in these efforts. In this slide, Thailand, Indonesia, other Asian countries, there are model projects to improve the energy efficiency. Well, for instance, in Vietnam, the model project for renovation to increase the energy use of efficient use of energy in the brewery. So this type of model project can be done in a specific region, specific country, and this technology can be delivered into other plants or facilities, and as a result, they can succeed to promote, to deliver the existing technology, and Japanese manufacturers can contribute to that efforts. These wide range of activities can be done through the government-affiliated organizations and the government itself and other public institutions. These are just some example of those. Lastly, I would like to touch upon a little bit about international context on Japanese government are engaged in. The good example on climate change and energy aspect, energy policy, is Asia-Pacific Partnership on Clean Development and Climate. These policy, international partnership, was initiated by the U.S. government. And as you can see, the partners to this partnership are 6 countries, including United States and Japan, Australia, China, and India. There are some characteristics to this APP complement to Kyoto Protocol. That means the only one country, Japan, has the limitation obligation under Kyoto Protocol and also ratified the Kyoto Protocol. So the other countries has no regulation or obligation to reduce CO2 or greenhouse gases. So in this sense, this partnership can be work complement to promote to Kyoto Protocol. And technology-oriented sectoral approach, public-private partnership, and project and activity-based. This partnership was participated by private sector in a specific area. I'll explain later. So it does not set the numerical target at each sector. Rather, they promote the project and activity through the partnership, private and public sector. As I said, these partners are only 6 countries, but these countries has a large share in the global emission. So partnership has huge impact, huge potential to contribute to the global warming. These are the 5 sector task force. The partnership has task forces from greener fossil energy to buildings and appliances. Japan has a chairmanship in steel and cement task force, U.S. in power generation and transportation and coal mining. And these sectors are shared almost more than half of all emission from 6 countries. So these 8 task force covers more than half of this emission from 6 countries. So how much is the impact of this APP partnership? Is you can see on the left side the GDP, energy consumption, CO2 emission. These 6 countries shares almost half in the world. And on the right, for a specific sector, these countries has also large amount of share. So it means only 6 countries discussed, and the result can be huge impact on global environment. So what actually we are discussing under this partnership, here is some example of our meeting. 3rd Policy Implementation Committee meeting. Actually, last year in May, 2nd Policy Implementation Committee was held at Berkeley. So many Japanese delegation and other countries come to Berkeley to discuss how to make progress under this APP. I was supposed to be there, but other engagement with Congress could not allow me to be here, unfortunately. This peak meeting is composed of Japanese government representatives and we discussed the current plans in each sector, action plans, and at the end of the meeting, we endorsed the all action plans, which contains 92 projects for all sectors, task forces. And it means we are committed to promote these projects under this partnership, and we have to continue to keep this momentum to finish these products. And now we are considering about how to enlarge this activity into more wider participants in a specific sectors. And we will plan to have a ministerial meeting at the end of this year. And this is, I guess, the last slide. So future activities of APP. China and India are very important players in this partnership. So we have to create some sort of incentives to them. Private company needs short-term results. But so far, China and India had participated in this partnership very well, but we have to think long-term plan under this partnership. And if we think about longer-term perspective, we need some sort of incentives to them, particularly to the private sectors. And IEA and other international organizations we are working with, this type of approach APP is taking is what is called sectoral approach. IEA is working with the energy efficiency indicators, which is a task asked by the G8 member countries. And exchange views between APP and IEA is very helpful and significant. I think that's the all of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and any questions is welcome. Thank you.
And now, without flying across the Pacific, you know everything going on in Japan, or a lot of what's going on in Japan. On climate change programs, we've come to the question and answer portion, and I will request that anyone asking a question here in the room do it on the microphone so that people listening by webcast can hear your question and the response. And I have one, and so does Diana over there. And then I know we have some coming in on webcast.
Is this running? My name is David Kubiak, and I'm with Planktos. It's an eco-restoration firm near San Francisco. And I have a couple of very quick questions I wanted to ask. I got here a little bit late, I'm sorry, in the middle of Mr. Minamikawa's speech. And I noticed in the presentation, the handed out presentation, you spoke about carbon sequestration and carbon sinks, and also mentioned forestry. Was there any mention in that period about ocean restoration? Okay, and second, does anybody here represent the interests of the fisheries industry or the ocean within the Ministry of Environment? On your team, has anybody had any experience in that regard?
You mean the sink?
Umi no fukushu no dairi.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that question. I certainly responsible for CCS, and in my understanding, Japanese government takes the position to remain the CCS in the ocean, but the situation is just stuck.
Okay, that's. Okay. The question though is, Right now, the work we're doing, and actually much of the research was done in Japan, shows that, like, the oceans are absolutely the worst victim of global warming right now. The acidity in the ocean that is killing the coral, that is starting to dissolve the plankton, and also that is sealing off the top level of the water. I mean, they're talking right now very seriously about no more sushi by 2050, right? I mean, the ocean fish being gone. And the bright side of this is that the plankton are down. The plankton that keep the entire system going are down by 10% around the world, partially because of the acid, but mostly because of the missing dust in the air. And the fact that if we brought just the 10% plankton that have died in the last 20 years, it would sequester over 3 billion tons of CO2, which is half of our emissions today globally. And it would not only sequester that, it would sequester it cheaply, it would create 10 times that amount of food for the fish, and we are losing our fisheries. And Japan is particularly affected. I've heard from people in the Ministry of Environment that say that the fisheries division is shrinking, and the entire industry in Japan is shrinking. And they're very worried about how that is going to be done. So I would urge you, we're involved in this business, and there'll be other firms coming in. We're sailing into the Pacific within a few months. But by bringing back the ocean, you can also solve a huge part of the climate problem. And it's sort of a win-win solution. I mean, you bring back the ecosystems, you bring back the fish, you bring back the whales, you bring back the seabirds, and you take out an enormous amount of CO2. And I just hope that there's somebody in the ministry that is looking at this. And
thank you very much. My answer is not enough, I believe, but the problem of effect of climate change, we have to check the very bad effect, damage on sea biodiversity in sea. For example, coral reefs. You said most of coral reefs in the sea has been damaged day by day. And as you said, some insect or some plankton being away. So now, so far, they live in coral reefs. But because of high temperature, they are now leaving from the coral reefs themselves. So the color of coral reefs change to white. It's so called bleaching, and bleaching means the coral that coral reef will die soon. So it can provide a habitat for many species of fish and some beings in that coral reefs. And of course, it's a very serious problem. And my former business was nature conservation, and at that division, some research we are now doing. And as a matter of fact, the end of April this year, we have a very big discussion on this problem in Tokyo. It starts 22nd April in Tokyo, and so-called ICRI, International Coral Reef Initiative General Meeting, which we held in Tokyo. And there we have to discuss and exchange information, including USA people. So now I have no answer. That's all. But as you said, our health to how to adapt or how to prevent the bad effect from climate change to lives in the sea is not enough. I have to admit. So, so I think not only lives in coral reefs, but also some many fields we have to enhance our efforts, I think. Thank you.
We have a question from the web that's also related to sequestration and then also to mandatory reporting. Since planting trees can generate CO2 credit, do you calculate carbon costs of primary resources, example, trees cut down? How much detail is included in reporting? Can business lower their carbon contribution by using recycled instead of directly manufactured paper? So one part is about forestry projects and how you do credit, and the other part is about what companies can do to lower their mandatory reporting emissions.
Okay, thank you very much. Japan has allowance about how many tons? 38% percentage of carbon, as I explained, and most of them have achieved by the good care for Japanese forests. Of course, some of them include planting, but so far the calculation system admitted by UNFCCC, planting is cannot be evaluated enough, I think. And good management of a forest is much better to accumulate the amount of absorption of CO2. So we are now calculating and preparing countermeasures. Of course, management of existing forest and also planting. But 99% of absorption can be calculated through good management. And in Japan, about 70% of land was filled with forest because most of those areas are mountainous area. It's not good for human activities. Manufacturing also it's not good. So, but many of them, about half of those mountainous areas was covered artificial forest. That is, we planted. Unfortunately, only one species of tree. That is Japanese cedar. Japanese cedar. Just after the World War II, means just after the burning out most Japanese houses because of bombing by USA B-29. Many houses were burned out. After that, Japanese people tried to construct new houses and buildings, mainly by using Japanese timber. So our ancestors cut many of trees from Japanese mountains. But so after that, of course, Japanese people are not so ignorant about nature. So they planted Japanese cedar for all areas. But unfortunately, after 10 years or 20 years, Japanese we could import cheaper timbers from Canada and Siberia areas. So we have abandoned to manage the forest, although we planted Japanese cedars with very high density. But of course, high density trees cannot grow well. No sunshine in the wood. So even now, most of timber is very thin. So to make them grow fatter and fatter, we have to cut many thin trees. So we introduce new measures to cut many trees to make sunlight space, to make them fatter through the process of photosynthesis, absorbing CO2 from sunshine. So that's our main measure to take care of the CO2 absorption.
Thank you. Whoa, lots of questions here in the room. We'll start in the back and then move forward.
Thanks, Catherine. This is Mike Fitzgibbon with the Air Resources Board Research Division. Thank you for coming here today. And Mr. Okamoto's presentation on slide 18, you talked about a technology for CO2 fixation using paper. I was just wondering if you could tell us about the status of that technology and how much CO2 you can fix with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. The slide shows the technology about CO2 sequestration and storage. And this is a very not so new technology, but it's not so ready for commercialization right now. And we think this technology in a long-term strategy. And in any macroeconomic model shows we need CCS technology if we commit to massive reduction, which can contribute to the ultimate objective of climate change convention. So all over the world, there are a lot of places, a lot of countries, regions, which are appropriate for the storage of the CO2. But unfortunately, Japan is not so good place in terms of CCS storage, CO2 storage. On the other hand, United States has a large potential in this storage, and actually some of the parts of the globe already introduced this technology in a part of the EOR, enhancement of oil production. As a result, they promote the production of oil, and as well they succeed to CO2 in the under the geographical area. But Japan is not in such situation. So what we are doing right now is we invest for R&D and research, particularly about what kind of place is appropriate for future storage in Japanese land. And we also invest a lot of money, 6 billion yen to support R&D, for instance, for finding out to a specific material is appropriate to CO2 transfer. I mean, CO2 have to extract from a specific point. For instance, the coal firing plant would produce a lot of CO2, but if we bring this CCS technology, put the particular plant, they can get CO2, but we have to find out a better solution, better technology to get CO2 from that plant, because currently the cost of getting CO2 from plant is extremely high. It is not the level at commercialization. So we spend a lot of money in aiming at commercializing this technology by the 2015 in the Japanese market. And we also find out the where is the appropriate place in Japan. And the other strategy we are taking is to promote of distribution of our technology, particularly the getting CO2 from the plant, because China or India plan to build a lot of coal piling plant in their domestic land. And in the future, they need CCS technology. At the time, we believe we might be a promoter to this technology into a specific region, and we contribute to reduction of CO2 because China would experience huge increase of CO2 in a global share. So it is very important for us, not just for us, but also for the globe. So this is the notion of a strategy to investment of CCS technology. Thank you.
My name is Kim Wagner. I'm with KW & Associates. My question is for both Mr. Minamikawa and Mr. Okamoto. I see that well, a lot of us here are focused on particularly transportation measures for reducing greenhouse gases, but your E3 initiative is very interesting. I was wondering if you have any other initiatives that you're looking at as being something mandatory in the future rather than just voluntary, and also what other alternative transportation fuels you're looking at this time.
So I will answer something from the environment aspect. At the moment, Japan has no mandatory system for biofuels or any alternative fuels for automobiles. But our Kyoto target achievement plan expects that some portion of biofuels will be introduced by 2010. So the government promoting the voluntary demonstration project and other activities around the islands in Japan. So, and in the future, we might consider some kind of mandatory scheme. But the question is how we can get the sufficient amount of biofuels from where? Because our homeland is not so big to produce a large amount of agricultural product or forestry products. So that is one question. And another one is the technical one, and from automobile industries, they said, E3 at first introduced in Japan in 2003. At that time, the Japanese automakers were not ready to introduce bioethanol more than 3%. Of course, they know, and we know, that the 10% blending is the common practice around the world, but they were not ready at that time. But last year and this year, major Japanese automaker announced they are ready to accept the 10% ethanol blending. So I think from technical point of view, major obstacle to expand the use of biofuel in Japan has been removed. But there is still a question about the supply side.
A question on the aisle.
I'm Ron Linden with Sacramento Regional Sanitation District. And when I look at, for the last presenter, a question, when I look at the first figure on page 2, or figure 7 in a sequential numbering, It's apparent, of course, that we are much more wasteful of energy than the European countries and especially Japan. But then when I see and realize that that picture, that graph sort of comes from page 4, the last graph on page 4, or figure 24 sequentially, it comes from taking the annual, the second part of figure 24, primary energy consumption, and divide it by actual GOP. So when that is done, that is done for China and India, you get a ratio in relation to Japan that is more than 10. And it's hard to sort of fathom and imagine that India and China would be factor of 10 on graph 7 there. So could you shed some light on that?
I'm sorry, I can't follow your question. What's your question?
Let me try to rephrase it. The chart comparing Japanese energy efficiency to Europe and the United States did not show India and China, and that their energy efficiency or energy consumption divided by their GNP is 10 times better. More than 10 times better than Japan. It's because they're poor countries.
No. It's more than 10 times higher.
Oh, higher consumption.
Yeah. Per
GNP.
GNP.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So it's more than
So
10% higher, not less.
I understand now. Okay.
So how can it be that high? I mean, U.S. is 2.7, and China and India would be 12 or 10, at least more than 10 on graph 7. Is it clear what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I think the number is not necessarily it's the same one if you compare two different graphs, but the sense what you said about the energy efficiency on China and India is correct. The energy efficiency is much worse than the other industrialized countries. The question is, I understand why this situation happens in these countries, and I think here's the situation. China and India, particularly China, has a large number of small plants, particularly energy plant or cement plant or steel plant in the domestic area, which is the capacity is very small and technology is very old, and they use bad quality of coal for energy production. And as a result, these type of plants or facilities can provide very low level of energy efficiency, but that doesn't matter to them because the coal production in the local area are very cheap, and they have to stick to the such low quality coal as a resource, natural resource, because they do not have an alternative. If they want to very good quality coal from other area, from other country, they have to ship from other country over the sea and brought into the domestic land, which are very costly, as you understand. And as a result, they stick to that policy or in the past, and that level of the efficiency is not, to be frankly, comparable to the level of the coastal line zone in China, because coastal line zone in China has already updated the technology, particularly steel and cement. They have cutting-edge technology to improve their energy efficiency. As a result, their energy efficiency is very comparable to the other industrialized countries, but in the domestic land, and there are huge amounts of the emission from them are not very well conditioned. So as a result, this huge difference between two countries and other developed countries has happened. And I do not exactly say how much different, but the difference is very much higher than other among the developed countries. Am I clear to your question? Yeah. Yes. But the reason I introduced the partnership of APP is this could be one of the solutions to improve that situation, because this contribution from United States and Japan and Australia can improve the situation, even though this plant is inside of their domestic land in China, because we are giving them the incentive to promote this kind of technology in deliberation in China and the India market by private company. So that's the core of this partnership, and we will show, we will expect that result will come in. Okay.
I'm going to take another question from the internet, and looks like Carrie's hand go up. This question has to do with the role of large institutional investors. Some of the world's largest pension funds are in Japan. These investors have a major influence on what government standards are set, what public corporations are held to, and what kind of new companies are funded to grow and become the mega corporations of the next generation. What are Japan's large institutional investors doing to put money into the environment and to advance the goals that you described in your presentation? Are they on board?
Well, as well as many companies in USA and the UK, Japanese company has a very serious problem. They have to pay pension money, and there are some money, especially for social security, for social welfare and social security, including hospital medicine also. But in Japan, especially in Japan, the ratio of pensioning and social security are very big compared with other countries. And so some people complain it's very heavy burden for activities of Japanese companies. And in addition to that, they have to provide enough money for environment. And so, but I think, I believe, so far, some regulations, for example, regulation on automobile gas emission, control NO2 or SOx, so that very stringent regulation force them supply money for environmental innovation and facility equipment. But from now, I'm not sure how they prepare enough money to invest or to invest or innovation or facilities, equipment. But most of Japanese companies understand the importance of environmental countermeasures, environmental measures, especially in the field of CO2, because as Okamoto said, we have almost no resources, especially fossil fuel resources we don't have. So to innovate energy efficiency facilities can be the very big instrument for Japanese companies to survive, and it can also a big weapon to fight against foreign companies in competition in the commercial field.
Thank you. Carrie Doan with Rosenkindle, and I think it's probably a question for Mr. Ninomiya. I was wondering if you could speak to post-2007 and how you expect to see a cap-and-trade system in Japan. Do you see an eventual harmonization with the EU or eventually California and other nations in a system? Do you expect subsidies to continue like you've been doing under JVETS? So if you could shed just a little light on how you expect to see the trading system post-2007.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. As you said, yes, it is the option of the emission trading system to link to other system. But at this moment, as I said, the JVETS is the first trial of cap and trade. So at this moment, we concentrate on accumulating knowledge and experience on managing this system. So how can we do it later on? It's still considering. But still, yes. Something wrong? Yeah. It is still an option. Yeah, but we have not determined yet. Thank you.
Alberto, did you still have a question?
Absolutely. Alberto Ayala with the Air Resources Board. Thank you very much for very informative presentations. Dr. Ninomiya, you talked about subsidies to cover the commitments for emission reductions. I'm interested to learn how you cover these subsidies. Where does the money come from to cover the subsidies? And a question for Mr. Okamoto. You talked about incentives as well to promote the Top Runner program. What type of incentives are we talking about? And if monetary, the same question. Where does the money come from to cover these programs?
Thank you for your question. The subsidy come from, of course, our budget. And as I said, the JVETS is the first trial and the experience of emission trading. So we consider the subsidies cost of learning to managing the emission trading system. So I personally don't think the subsidy system is last entirely. It's just the first step of development of emission trading scheme in Japan.
Thank you for your question. I said several times the incentive to promotion any policies by the government of Japan. The specific to the Top Runner program, I think this is the regulation. So in this sense, there is no scheme to give any manufacturers subsidies or money or some kind of positive incentive. But the incentive to Top Runner program is to create the competitive circumstance in the market which are appropriate for the environmental friendly technology. And if they stick to the strategy to promote their cutting edge of the company in the pursuing the environmental friendly technology, that will be reached to results in the competition in the market. So the Top Runner program define the function of the market and create the win-win situation, win for the manufacturers or participants to the market, and for the win for the consumers or the public to get the benefit from the improved efficient market or efficient products.
I have a final question from the web, which is back to the mandatory reporting system. This is from Natasha Mescal at Ecotech, and she's interested whether or not your reporting system is available for people to try or test. Can they get onto it on the web, for example? And also how you developed your emission factors. Are they published locally in Japan or elsewhere? And did you use a set of default emission factors from someplace else, like the United Nations?
Okay. Our accounting and reporting system has been developed very recently, and I think within my knowledge, I think no web-based system installed yet. And as for the emissions factors, of course, we try to be consistent with the IPCC guidelines for GHG emissions inventory. But in some cases, we recommend to use other factors, which has been developed. Our expert committee held under the Ministry of the Environment. And such information has been made publicly available on our website, but unfortunately only in Japanese. Sorry.
We'll try to translate some of that as background for our...
I think almost all data submitted from each companies can be accommodated in one or two CDs. And in our experience in the field of chemicals, many NGO people can request all data from government. And of course, on request, we have to provide them, and in the frame of CDs. And they analyze, and including NGO people in USA can get that one, and they can analyze, and they can make their homepage by showing Japanese data and the output of the analysis. So I believe every people can use that output in the future, in the near future.
I might say that California's own Climate Action Registry used the same basis for its protocols, the IPCC, and then made refinements as they saw fit. We had a special request for one more question, if you can tolerate it, about cement.
Just make sure I'm in a transmitting hotspot here. My name is John Cheers. I'm with the Center for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Technologies. And yes, my question on cement is, before the Climate Action Team process and AB 32 process happened over this last year, there was a Global Climate Change Advisory Committee, and they looked at opportunities for reductions. Cement was looked at as still being an area that California could try and implement further reductions. The issue of blended cement, or what's also known as pozzolanic cements, silica-rich cements, was discussed. And of course, the easiest way to do that is to use coal fly ash, coal power being important in Japan. I'm sure that's a big part of how you generate reductions in the cement industry, along with, my understanding, is increased use of solid waste as a combustion fuel. The challenge in California is we're far away from coal plants because we don't have any in-state coal plants, really, to speak of. Some coal fly ash is used, but there are mercury emissions associated with the use of that fly ash. So California is looking for how it could further reduce emissions from cement production and use, recognizing that, like Japan, it has the issue of earthquakes and how to maintain, develop new types of cements that are compatible with, earthquake proofing or earthquake resistance. So I was wondering, and if it's more appropriate to have this conversation after we close up, I was wondering if anybody here could speak to or put me, and I know that people at the EPA and the ARB are interested in this issue as well, in contact with people who may have done research on other alternatives for cement that are commercially available or would be presumed to be commercially available within, say, the next decade.
Thank you. I'm not so, I'm not expert on the technology on cement industry, but in my usual work, I had many opportunity to discuss with my counterparts from cement industry, and I have sometimes give them advice, and sometimes I get their advice to me. And my basic understanding to cement industry is this. The cement technology in the process of the production of cement is very stable. In other words, there is no huge energy efficiency or CO2 reduction in a foreseeable future because of the renewable innovative technology in the cement production. So, of course, there are lots of technology to improve energy efficiency. TRT is one of them. But as you know, the cement production has necessarily produced CO2 in the process itself. So the energy efficiency is just a part of the half of the effect of CO2 reduction. So in this sense, the Japanese manufacturers are absolutely at the top level of energy efficiency, but at the same time, the latter half, which must be produced in the process of cement production, cannot be dealt with in Japanese manufacturers. So there is a problem about that, because if the Japanese manufacturers are very efficient, and if we very stick to the position of enforcing strict regulation on their production or their CO2 emission from their plants, they might transfer their plants into other regions like China. And China has no limitations so far in international context, international treaty context. So as a result, China would produce CO2 cement cement from CO2 from cement industry, in other words, freely. So as a result, in a global term, the CO2 emission would increase because a Japanese efficient plant has ceased, and other new plant in inefficient energy efficiency in China would increase their production of cement. That's a very bad effect on the global term. So we have to think about that. And the APP, as I explained in my presentation, would be one solution to improve the global effect. Particularly, China has a large lion's share of cement production, and we believe this kind of good technology, particularly in the energy efficiency aspect, is very important for all the people in the world, and to contribute that deliberation of that technology would be very good, not only for the Japanese people, but also the rest of the world. Is that enough to your question? I'm not so sure.
Well, we'll continue that after we adjourn. He has many more questions, he always does. Please join me once again in thanking our distinguished visitors from Japan. Their wonderful presentation.
We are very happy to be here with you and to show our major policies and exchange information. It's very significant even for us. So I appreciate your hospitality and also the temperature of this room. It's chilly enough. Of course, we are accustomed to this temperature because we are now introducing warm beach exercise. So, but anyway, next time if I have a chance to be here, I'd like to see that clock on the wall works very well. So, thank you.